You know, when we think about global power, our minds usually go straight to armies, to politicians, to big international summits. But what if I told you the real power, the invisible hand guiding the world, is actually something you might have in your wallet right now? This is the world of currency power. It's this hidden force that decides which countries can borrow for cheap, who sets the rules of global trade, and who can literally turn the financial system into a weapon. It is, without a doubt, one of the most decisive forces shaping our world, and today we're going to pull back the curtain and see how this system really works.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll reveal the secret pyramid of global money. Then, we'll look at the pillars that hold it all up. We're going to trace the dollar's incredible journey to the top and see the immense power that comes with sitting on that throne. After that, we'll meet the challengers trying to storm the gates. And finally, we'll peek into the future and see what a multipolar financial world might actually look like for all of us.
All right, first things first. To get this, you have to understand that the global financial system is not a level playing field. Not even close. It's a pyramid with a really clear, really rigid hierarchy that dictates how money and influence flow all around the globe.
It's the ultimate question, right? Who's really in charge? And the answer? Well, it's shifting. In the 21st century, a country's influence isn't just measured by its tanks and aircraft carriers anymore. It's measured by the trust the world places in its currency. Because think about it, when everyone else uses your money for their trade and their savings, you gain some serious leverage over them.
And that, right there, is currency power. The best way to think about it is like it's the operating system for the entire global economy. And the country that controls the currency at the very center of it all, well, they get to write the code. They set the rules for everybody else who wants to plug in. And it affects everything, from the price of oil to how effective international sanctions can be.
Now, this power isn't spread out evenly. It's this super strict hierarchy that we can visualize as a pyramid. At the very top, the apex predator, you've got the US dollar. Just below that, you have the other heavyweights. We're talking the euro, the Japanese yen, the British pound. These are currencies that are widely trusted, held in reserve by central banks all over the world. A little further down, you start to see the rising challengers, like China's renminbi, which is definitely trying to climb higher. And then you have the massive base of the pyramid. This is made up of the soft currencies of most other nations. They're often volatile, they're rarely used outside their own borders, and it leaves them kind of stuck, having to play by the rules set by those at the top.
So, what does it actually take to climb this pyramid? I mean, a country can't just wake up one day and declare its currency the most important. No way. You have to earn that position. You have to build this incredibly strong foundation of trust and stability that can withstand, well, pretty much anything the world throws at it.
A dominant currency is built on these 6 massive pillars. First, you need a stable economy. Nobody wants to hold a currency that's just going to lose its value to crazy inflation. Second, you have to have deep, liquid financial markets, especially for government bonds. This gives other countries a safe place to park literally trillions of dollars. Third, institutions have to be credible. We're talking an independent central bank that isn't just a piggy bank for politicians, and a solid rule of law that protects investors. Fourth, you got to be open. Capital has to be able to flow freely in and out. Fifth, you just have to be big. A massive economy with a huge share of global trade. And finally, the 6th pillar, and this one might be the most important, geopolitical trust. The world has to believe you have the power and, just as important, the will to keep the whole system secure. It's a feedback loop, really. Power builds trust, and that trust builds even more power.
So, which country has managed to build all 6 of those pillars better than anyone else? Yep, the United States. But the dollar's rise to the top wasn't some overnight victory. It's a story that took a whole century of global chaos, some really smart strategic moves, and honestly, a little bit of luck.
The story really starts with the fall of the British pound. For about 100 years, sterling was king. But 2 world wars just left Britain exhausted and buried in debt. The U.S., on the other hand, walked out of those wars as the world's undisputed industrial and financial giant. So in 1944, at a conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, world leaders basically crowned a new king, the U.S. dollar. They made it the only currency you could trade in for gold. But then in 1971, the U.S. cut that link to gold. A lot of people thought, okay, that's it, the dollar's reign is over. But it found a new anchor, oil. Through something called the petrodollar system, all the major oil producers agreed to price their oil only in U.S. dollars. This was an absolute masterstroke, because now if any country anywhere wanted to buy oil, they first had to buy dollars, creating this massive, constant demand for the currency that's still with us today.
Okay, so now we know how the dollar climbed to the peak of the pyramid. So what's life like up there? Well, let's just say it comes with some truly incredible advantages, perks that no other country on Earth gets to enjoy. This top dog status has a special name, the exorbitant privilege. It was actually coined by a French finance minister back in the 60s who was getting pretty fed up with American dominance. And it just perfectly describes the unique, powerful benefits the US gets from having the world's go-to currency. This quote from economist Barry Eichengreen just nails the magic of this privilege. The United States can print these little green pieces of paper for just a few cents, and in exchange, the rest of the world gives them real stuff. Cars from Germany, electronics from South Korea, coffee from Colombia, all worth $100. The real-world effects of this are just immense. Because the world needs dollars, there's this huge, never-ending demand for U.S. government bonds. That lets the U.S. government borrow money way cheaper than anyone else. It also means the U.S. can import way more stuff than it exports, year after year, without causing a currency crisis. But the real power is geopolitical. By basically controlling the plumbing of global finance, like the SWIFT payment system that most international bank transfers use, the U.S. can watch transactions and, with the push of a button, cut entire countries off from the world economy. It's an incredibly potent weapon.
But hey, no king rules forever, right? In a world that's constantly changing, the dollar's dominance is starting to face some serious challenges. Other nations are building their own alternative financial systems, and they're hoping to chip away at that throne.
Now, if you look at the scoreboard, the dollar's lead is still massive. I mean, it makes up nearly 60% of all the foreign currency reserves held by central banks. For SWIFT payments, it's even higher. The euro is a distant second at about 20% of reserves. And China's renminbi? Despite China's huge economy, its currency accounts for less than 3% of both. So yeah, the gap is enormous. But you have to remember, these challengers are playing the long game.
China's big strategy is basically to try and leapfrog the old system using technology. They're pushing a digital yuan really hard and building new payment platforms like mBridge, which lets countries pay each other directly without ever touching the dollar system. They're also using their giant Belt and Road project to get trade partners to do business in renminbi. But here's the catch. Technology isn't everything. China's tight government control over its currency and its general lack of transparency, those things run completely counter to the pillars of credibility and openness that you need to build real global trust.
So countries are now actively trying out ways to de-dollarize their trade. A recent deal between India and the UAE is a perfect example. They traded 1 million barrels of oil by paying directly in their own currencies, Indian rupees and UAE dirhams. The whole thing settled instantly, and it completely bypassed the need to first convert to dollars and use the old SWIFT system. Now, it's a small step for sure, but it's a huge proof of concept for a world that's less reliant on a single currency.
So, what does all this add up to? All these little cracks in the system, all these new experiments. Are we about to see a totally new financial world order?
This trend line really tells the story. For the last 20-plus years, the dollar's slice of the global reserves pie has been slowly but surely shrinking, from over 70% down to under 60%. This isn't a collapse, it's a gradual diversification. Central banks around the world are getting a little nervous about putting all their eggs in one basket. This is the slow, grinding shift away from a world with one financial superpower to a world with several.
And this right here explains why it's so incredibly hard for other countries to break out and climb that pyramid. Most developing nations are trapped by what economists call original sin. It means they can't borrow money on the global markets in their own currency. So imagine a country like Argentina needs a loan to build a new highway. They have to take that loan out in US dollars. Now, if the Argentine peso suddenly loses value against the dollar, the size of their debt just explodes overnight, even though they haven't borrowed a single dollar more. It is a vicious, dangerous trap that keeps them dependent on the currencies at the very top.
At the end of the day, the key thing to remember is that the trust behind a global currency is like the roots of a giant ancient tree. It takes generations to grow that deep and strong, to weave itself into every part of the global economy. And for that very same reason, it doesn't die overnight. The system is incredibly sticky. And change, when it does come, happens really, really slowly, not in some big, sudden crash.
Which brings us to one last really critical thought. The great power struggle of the 21st century might not be one with aircraft carriers, but with computer code. It's going to be a battle of digital ledgers and payment systems. The big question is no longer just who has the biggest army, but who gets to write the source code for the global economy. Who is going to control the money of the future?